The story of Harcourts began more than a century ago. In 1888, when John Bateman Harcourt opened a real estate company in New Zealand that would go on to become a trusted global brand. But another kind of expansion began in 1997, when a young agent named Mike Green, his wife Irene, and their family moved Harcourts into Australia at a time when many thought it wouldn't stick.
So yeah, there wasn't a cunning plan or a long-term strategy or a desire to be a real estate agent. It was purely by accident, by chance, but best thing I ever did.
Instead, Mike turned that bold move into a global vision. As international managing director and co-owner of Harcourts International, he grew the network from a handful of offices into one of the world's largest real estate franchise systems, now operating hundreds of offices across 11 countries with tens of billions in annual sales. Under his leadership, Harcourts has been named New Zealand's most trusted real estate brand for more than a decade, a testament not just to scale, but to consistency, culture, and values. Mike built his success on the belief that doing the right thing always wins, even when it doesn't show up first on the scoreboard. That commitment to people, purpose, and legacy is central to how he leads, and how he's helped Harcourts become a business that stands for something bigger than sales. Today, he joins Darryl Davis for a candid conversation about leadership, resilience, and what it really takes to build success that lasts. Let's dive into today's episode.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are in the world. Welcome to Real Estate Unscripted. We have an incredible guest, Mike Green from Harcourts. Mike, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, doing great. Thank you, Darryl. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, listen, I am, as I said to you, I am so excited that this truly is a highlight of my career to interview you, and I mean that so sincerely. You know, I get to meet so many leaders in our industry, but you know, Mike, you're just an authentic, honest human being, which I love so very much, and so that's why I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you, Darryl. I'll try not to let you down.
Okay. All right. So, Mike, what I'd like to do is just introduce you to the listeners, for those that have been living under a rock and that they may not be aware of you and Harcourts and the awesomeness that you guys are. I didn't know this, but when doing my research, I discovered that Harcourts was founded in 1888 in Wellington, New Zealand, one of the oldest real estate brands in the world, now in 11 countries worldwide, with approximately 900 plus offices, 10,000 team members with staff and agents and the whole nine yards. Your volume, I saw for 23 to 24 was about $50 billion in sales. I try to get a more recent one, but nobody would share your financials with me, Mike. And also, and as far as the Harcourts brand, they frequently listed among the world's largest real estate networks by size and global reach. And you're also in the U.S. as well. I know California. Is there any place else, Mike, that I'm missing?
Yeah, well, California, Oregon, Hawaii, mainly West Coast.
Okay, very great. Now, a little bit about Mike. Mike began his real estate career at 19 years old. Now, from what I understand, he didn't like wake up and say, I want to be a real estate professional. If I'm not mistaken, I read a story about you applied for another job that didn't work out. So then somebody suggested real estate. So you figure, so it was almost like an accident getting into real estate. Am I getting that right, Mike?
Yeah, it was totally by accident. I'd grown up, mum and dad had high expectations. I was always going to be a lawyer. So
My mother too.
Yeah. And probably there's some commonality in that, but so I went to university and I found it was the first time away from home, and I found out about sports, and if you don't turn up, no one cares. And so I hated it. I hated virtually everything about it. So at the end of that year, I dropped out, much to my parents' dismay. And wasn't sure what I was going to do. I'd no real idea at that point. And I applied. I was flatting. I was actually flatting with Irene at the time, so we were paying rent, and so I needed to work. And I applied for a job washing cars, and they turned me down. And I thought, what's going on with that? And the guy said, no, there's no point hiring you because you'll be here for 3 or 4 months and then you'll go and I'll have to start again. So, and then I saw an ad for a real estate agent and I thought, well, that's, real estate agents, they drive nice cars, they wear nice suits. That seems like a good job. So at 19, I went in. I had to borrow one of our flatmates' cars because I didn't have a car at the time. Went in, saw the guy, and was offered a job. And typical real estate probably interview at that time. About 45 minutes. I sat and listened to him for 40 minutes. He asked me a few questions at the end and said, congratulations, you're now a real estate agent. And I walked out and I remember ringing Irons. I was so excited. I'm in real estate. How good's this? And talked to Irene about it. And she said, oh, and so what's the salary? Or how do you get paid? And I said, I actually don't know. And I didn't know that it was commission only at that point. I'd found that out later. So yeah, there wasn't a cunning plan or a long-term strategy or a desire to be a real estate agent. It was purely by accident, by chance, but best thing I ever did. I mean, without a doubt.
Well, let me give some accolades now because it's amazing that for somebody who started that way, like, I don't get a paycheck. I didn't realize this is to continue your story. You and your wife became franchise owners of Harcourts in New Zealand. And then in 1997, you were selected to spearhead the expansion from New Zealand into Australia. Then, so that remained a family-led company. And then, now the company, given its expansion and everything else, I mean, to me, that's amazing. Like, you were like the company is global now and in all these different countries, 11 countries, and it all started with you going into Australia. Am I right in this? Did I get all my facts right?
Yeah, yes, largely. I mean, but like I think everyone would know, that sort of growth and success and what have you, that's not down to one person. That's a whole lot of people that get excited about something and become part of something that matters and means something. So, yeah, I mean, we went offshore for the first time into Australia, and it wasn't so much selected. It's a leadership lesson, I guess, for me. We'd grown our franchise in Auckland, Irene and I. We worked together, and we've worked together now for almost 40 years, 35 years.
Wow.
And we grew our franchise and it was very successful. My goal as a franchisee at the time and running my real estate business was to be number one. I just wanted to be number one. So that just drove me, and I was young and aggressive and as you are. And so we grew and we were very successful, and the business was number one 4 years in a row for Harcourts in New Zealand. It was doing very, very well. The market was very good. And I lost my way as a leader. I started to believe my own bullshit, and Irene used to call me Sir Lunch a lot. And it's an interesting thing, when you're driven and you're focused on your business and you're doing all the little things and you're growing it's great. But man, you take your eye off the ball, and I did, and I wasn't as focused. A mate of mine rang me and said, I want to go do some race car driving. Do you want to come with me and do some driving? So we bought 2 cars and we started touring around driving race cars. And to be quite frank, I lost my way. And that was why we went to Australia, because we've been coming across here quite often on holidays, and we thought, really like to go. And I remember waking up mid-year and thinking, I've either got to get myself reconnected and refocused into my role as the leader of my business, or I need to do something else. Because if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to lose my people. And so we packed up less than 5 months later and moved to Australia and kicked off Harcourts. And I remember Steve Collins was the managing director at the time, and I rang Steve and said, hey, we're going to go to Australia. We're going to live in Brisbane. Do you want to do something with Harcourts? Because I'm going to be in real estate. It's just, what I'm going to do. So he came across and we spent some time and decided there was a huge opportunity, and that's how it started. And we started as 50-50 partners here in Australia, and I grew it and Irene worked from there. So it was, again, it's interesting. People say, oh, you must have had some real clear goals or strategies, but a lot of this is just being in the right time, in the right place at the right time with the right attitude, and we didn't know we were going to move. We just got excited about it. We didn't know what the opportunity was like, but we came and found out and just worked hard. So
I get that. So this wasn't a planned thing. Okay, let me move to the next country and start develop. Like it sounds like again some more stumbling into your next level. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Well,
that's right. I think, for me, Daryl, the leadership thing, um, and this will sound a bit weird, but I think when I'm performing at my best, I'm waking up in the middle of the night and looking at the ceiling and thinking about what's going on and thinking about the business. And when I sleep well, I'm too comfortable, and that's a danger sign for me. I need the I guess the challenge. I need the busyness, and no doubt you'll ask me a little bit later about retirement, which I went into for a while. Just a terrible, terrible thing. Just a terrible, terrible thing for me. Getting up without a purpose, I don't think you can. I think when you're driven and when you're passionate, you have to get up every day with purpose and passion. And when you don't, I think it's a really dangerous place, and you can very quickly, as I did, very quickly slip into a, well, what was it all about type mindset, which is dangerous, I think.
that's really powerful that you're sharing that because my wife said that to me one time. Like I was uneasy and I didn't know why. And she said similar to you. She said that's because you have nothing to worry about right now. You do best when there's a problem to fix. That somehow the problem gets me focused
Yeah,
on what needs to be done. And without that, when I'm comfortable, I'm actually uncomfortable with that, if that makes sense.
that's absolutely right. I think
Yeah.
that's right.
All right. So that's awesome. All right. Let me see here. So early lessons in your early sales years, before you took the leadership, were there any mistakes that you made that you can see that it cost you, but you learned from it?
Yeah, I think so. And part one that stands out, and it was probably as much naivety as anything, but I totally underestimated the importance of the basics. And when I started in real estate, I was 19, and I worked out quite quick that older people wouldn't deal with me, or not that they wouldn't deal with me, but they'd struggle with me because I was young, and they looked at me and said, "Well, you're young enough to be my son or grandson in some instance." So I quickly found my niche, which was working with first home buyers, young couples who I connected with better. So that was good. But I started in a market that was pretty strong, and so I just turned up, smiled, was positive, and sold houses, and thought this is great. And I think in my first year, I earned $29,000, which in 1979 was a lot of money. I went and bought a brand new car and put a sunroof in it. I was so excited. Um, but I didn't learn any of the fundamentals. I didn't know how to do a listing presentation. I didn't know how to negotiate a sale. I'd get 3 or 4 or 5 offers on a property, and I'd just put them in front of the seller, and they'd take one, and off we go. And so when the market stopped a year in, I was totally lost. I had no clue how to prospect. I had no clue about setting up a database or keeping in touch or building those relationships or personal promotion or any of that. And so I had to re-engineer and reinvent myself. And so I spent a lot of time learning, what are the basics? What do I have to do to actually succeed in a market that was much tougher? So I think the mistake I made for a long time was not understanding that the basics are the foundation. And if you don't have the basics in place, and whether it's as a salesperson or as a leader, whenever you go off track, it's because you've stopped doing the basics, I believe. So that was the lesson. And it's been, I look at all the salespeople over the years and the leaders that I've coached and worked with. If they get those basics, that consistent persistence in place, doing the right things every day, and that's not the glamorous stuff, that's the boring stuff, but you got to do it every day. That's where you build. I think that's where you build a career. So that was a lesson I learned, and I spent 3 or 4 months not selling a lot, wondering what on earth had happened. Doing open homes, and no one turned up. And up until then, we'd had, a dozen groups would turn up, and you'd have a couple of offers, and it was easy. But I think in hindsight, if I'd started in a harder market, I would have either learnt those basics quicker, or I wouldn't have survived. One of the two.
Okay, so there's several powerful things that you just said in that. First of all, what you just addressed is pretty much what's going through a lot of agents right now, where they came into the market where you didn't need a lot of skill, it was such a hot market that it was easy just to make money. But now we're shifting in certain parts of the country, and I'm not sure about your side of the world. But where it's not that easy. Now you do need to have skill and you do need to know the basics. And so any agent that's come into the business the last few years, they're discovering that they need to do that. So that's really powerful. Now I've got to ask you, during the 3 months that you weren't generating, you came off this big high and you're trying to figure it out. You're doing open house and nobody's showing up. How did you mentally get through that mini drought you were going through?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Darryl. I think after the initial shock, because I'd gone from this easy utopia to nothing. So after that initial shock, I think one of the questions that I know you mentioned it a wee while ago was what do you think sort of drives success in leadership, and I think a lot of it is energy and attitude and enthusiasm, and I think people say, oh, you got to be mentally tough, and you do, but I think it's positive outlook, and I think at that time, I mean, it was all new, but I was positive that I could do it, that it's a great opportunity. I love the business. I love the people I was working with. I love the interaction. I love the deal. I can still remember driving away with my first contract and fist pumping in the car and being so excited. So there was no doubt in my mind that I could succeed at it and it could work. I just need to find out how. And so I went and talked to a whole lot of, there were experienced agents in the business I started and that had been there a while. And I just went to them and said, what on earth's going on? What do I have to do? Tell me what to do. And everyone has an opinion, as you know. And so I got lots of really good advice around the basics. And I just started doing those. And I just got into this habit. And it had got so quiet that you didn't have a lot to do. So cold calling, door knocking, I just had to do it. There was nothing else to do. So I just worked really hard. And I think I mentioned earlier the consistent persistence. And I think the one of the biggest challenges in real estate is inconsistency. Someone says, "Oh, do a geographic farm." So you do it for a few months, you don't get a call, so you stop doing it. Or I'm going to ring my database regularly, or I'm going to whatever it is, and you start doing it, and then you stop. You get busy, you haven't got a plan. You get into the cycle of up and down where you prospect, you list, you sell, and you stop prospecting at some point, and so down it goes, and so you get into this up and down, and so I think it's about that consistency. And I said earlier the non-glamorous stuff, send 3 thank you cards a day, ring 5 people a day off your database, knock on 10 doors a day, do 2 opens a day, and doing it over and over and over again. It can be hard. Well, it is hard. It is hard to do it, but that's the key, I think. So during that time, Darryl, I just focused on getting to know the basics and then just doing them and staying positive.
I want to highlight what you just said for everybody listening. What I've always told our coaching members, power agents, is that the secret sauce to being successful is what you said, and that's being consistent. That if you do whatever it is, but you're consistent with it. The analogy I use, if you take a boulder and you drop it in the middle of the ocean, it could sit in that bottom for 1,000 years, and that water will never penetrate that boulder. But if you take a river, run it through a mountaintop, after thousands of years, you're going to create a valley. It is that consistent action of the water moving that cuts through a mountain. And this is what agents should do. Now, let me ask you about the leadership aspect, because so you discovered as an agent, you had the success and then the drought, that consistent action you've got to take. I'm sure the same happened for you when you first got into that leadership, that there were things that you made mistakes, and then after you got through it, you said, okay, here's this, and this that makes a good leader. What was your epiphanies about leadership?
There's many of them, Darryl. As we've talked about, the basics, and there's a set of basics you need to do as a leader. I think in real estate, and as a leader or as an agent or a property manager or whatever the role may be, the enthusiasm and the passion you bring and the confidence to the role I think goes a long way. If you've got an energy, a really positive energy, people want to be around you, and whether they're clients or whether they're team members or what have you. So always showing up with energy, I think is massively important. And I mean, I know there are parts of my role, today that I don't enjoy, but I know I've got to do them, and I just work on what have I got to do to be at my best in this role. And opening our conference, which you came and have spoken at a number of times, standing up in front of 1,200 agents and being inspirational, it used to terrify me. Like what am I going to say? And what if I forget? And what if, and it was the most daunting thing I ever did. And I still get, sweaty palms and what have you. But I also realized it was part of my role. And if I wanted to do this job, I had to be good at it and I had to learn. So I went and got coaching. But equally, before every opening of conference, I would have brand new shoes. I don't think I've been to a conference where I haven't had sore feet, because I get brand new shoes and I get a suit and I get a haircut and I've got some lucky underwear and I wear my lucky underwear, because I know that when I walk out there feeling good, I'm going to perform better. So, I think doing whatever it is, whether it's meditation or goal setting or reading or exercise in the morning or whatever it is, but doing what you got to do to get your head right to bring that energy every day is vital. And there are some days where you get up and you just don't feel as excited about life. And I just know on those days I've got to change that mental attitude before I walk into the office, because if I know I've had a big fight and I walk in and I'm grumpy, I can change the atmosphere in a heartbeat. Equally, and I'll drive to work. I don't listen to motivational things in the car. I listen to my favorite music and I turn it up really loud, and the car vibrates, and I sit at the lights and the car's doing this and there's people looking at me like I'm a nut. But when I pull into the car park, when I get out, I'm vibrating. And if I can bring that energy, so I think bringing the energy is massively important in leadership in any role. I learned really early the skills to be a great leader are quite opposite to the skills to be a great agent. And in some ways, the better leaders are often the more average agents, because, as we've talked about, I've been in real estate a long, long time, and I love the industry and I love our people. And I love the superstars and what have you. But to be really good at real estate, you've got to be a bit ego driven. You've got to be a bit selfish. You've got to be a bit focused on you. To be a great leader, you've got to turn it 180 degrees around the other way. And it's no longer about you. It's about your people. It's about their success. I remember Steve said to me years and years ago, he said, Mike, help enough people around you become successful and you will become unusually successful yourself. And it's a bit self-serving, but it's absolutely true. And so being one of the lessons I learned in leadership early on, it's all about your people. And the day you're more excited about your people getting up and getting awards is the day you truly are leading. So I think that's a massive thing to understand, is being a leader. It's totally the other way around from being a driven salesperson.
That is awesome. And I will echo that and highlight that. When my speaking business shifted was because obviously being a speaker, it's hard to not have it be about you. You're the face and the thing that people hire you, But when I shifted from that, my business isn't about me, that it's about my staff, my team. I work for them. I work for their families. I need to help them survive financially. And our power agents, our coaching members, my whole company, we work for our power agents. And that's I agree with you. That's an incredible leadership mind shift, that when you have that, I think you'll hit success with that mentality.
Yeah. So. I think that you hear the comment, Darryl, about servant leadership, and there's a lot of cliches and what have you, but I think it's so true, and it's not something you can fake. If you deal with a salesperson or a leader who's more focused on their success and making the sale or achieving their goals, you feel that, you know it. Equally, if you deal with someone, leader or agent or sales and anything that is clearly focused on your success and helping you, you feel that too. And you can't fake that. So I think it's a shift that you have to make, but it's a shift that you actually make. It's not something you can fake.
Brilliant, brilliant. All right, I have a question number 9 on my list of questions was, so I'm jumping to 9. Looking back, and we might answer it a little bit, but looking back, what do most agents underestimate about what ownership and leadership really demands? Because sometimes agents, they think, okay, you know what? I want to keep all the money, so I want to become a broker and run a company versus being an agent. So what do they underestimate?
I think a lot of what we were just talking about, the skills to actually grow and lead a big business are quite different. And I think a lot of agents underestimate that. Certainly in our part of the world, a lot of people see it as the natural progression. It's sort of, well, I'm an agent, but I need to own my own business and I should do. And, people expect you to take that step. But I think a lot of agents underestimate just how involved it is, and dealing with the legal side, dealing with the hard stuff, the leases, dealing with all of the employment issues, and dealing with people, dealing with teams and working hard. A lot of driven salespeople can't understand why other people don't do what they do, and so if you're working with a team of agents and no matter what you do, they just don't have the same hunger that you do or that you think they should have. That's a massively frustrating place to be. And I think a lot of agents underestimate the skills needed to actually coach and mentor and grow people and get them to do what you want them to do because they want to do it. And it's a really hard skill to have. So, and in my part of the world, a lot of our principals still sell because they come into it, they hire some people, they build an agency, but they keep selling themselves. And while they're doing that, they're not putting 100% of their focus and effort into their teams. And so they have higher turnover and higher or lower productivity. And so that frustrates them. And then their own sales aren't as strong because they are getting torn in the other direction. And so it costs both ways. And, I've sat and spoken to many agents, brokers over the years and said, you seriously should consider just be an agent. You loved it. You were great at it. You really enjoyed it. You had more freedom. You didn't have the responsibility, and you did really well. Just do that. Why are you doing this and killing yourself, getting stressed, earning half what you earned to be a broker because you sort of feel like you should be? So I think, I think most agents just underestimate what's involved in actually being a good leader because it's not, as we all know, it's not something that you can just fall into and just wing it. Like you've got to, like any success in life, you've got to be really focused. You've got to understand what you got to do. You've got to be persistent. You've got to be consistent. You've got to do a really great job to be a top 10% broker. It always amazes me that people think they can do both and be top 10% of both. Like I've never met anyone that's that good.
Yeah, I so agree. I've never been a fan of a broker or a principal that is building a business with agents and still listing and selling themselves, because there's a conflict there. You can't master both, right? You're either building a team or you're building your own business, and you try to do both, you're going to fail. So,
I think a danger, Darryl, is a lot of salespeople. We look for reasons. Very few say, "Oh, the reason I'm not succeeding is me. It's because I don't work hard and I'm not ringing enough people." Most it's the market or it's interest rates or it's, Donald or it's there's a whole host of reasons why I'm not being successful right now. And so when you've got a principal or a broker who's out in the trenches selling, listing property, doing all that, there's a reason right there in front of you. Well, the reason I'm not successful is because I have no coach, I have no leader, and he takes all the good leads, and we hear that all the time. So I think it's really important. If you're going to be a leader, lead and put everything into your people. We've just talked about that. Putting everything into your people, helping them succeed. That's how you become a great leader, I think.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's see where I want to go with my next question here. What in the what did you learn in those first 90 days when you went to Australia? And how do you think about leadership and growth at that time? So yeah, what did you do that first? And if I don't have my facts correct, then of course Mike correct me. So when you went to Australia, that's when that's when the leadership was and building the company beyond just yourself. Am I right on that fact there?
Yeah, absolutely. The focus for Ira and I when we first moved here was just recruiting officers to join the group. And so I just did listing presentations every day for about 2.5 years to Australian brokers about joining a New Zealand company. So you can imagine, like I heard every joke, every Kiwi joke. Do you have to be called Barbara to work for Harcourts? Is your mascot a sheep? Because the Aussies and the Kiwis is a bit like the Canadians and the Americans. There's a little brother, big brother, and they love to hate. And so it was hard, and so doing listing presentations every day. I think in hindsight, that first 2 years here in Australia was the hardest period of my professional life, just because it was soul destroying, just doing the presentations over and over.
Now, wait a second. You just said soul destroying. Is that what you just said? All right. I want everybody to hear that because I know sometimes we have a mixture on this call. We have leaders and we have agents, and I know agents sometimes feel like their soul has been crushed. So I wanted them to hear that you said that because you were there. And now look at you now. So continue, please.
Well, an interesting story, Darryl, because I got 2 years in. We'd been writing a check every 2 or 3 months into the business that was 2 or 3 times the salary that the business was paying us. And, so we're going backwards. We're losing money every month.
You're losing money for 2 years. Okay.
Yeah. We made a profit after 2.5 years. That was the first month we made a profit. And I remember at the end of the second year, it was coming up to Christmas. I went out, I did a listing presentation to an Australian agent about why they should join, an Australian broker, why they should join Harcourts. Got told that, I was wasting my time, that it was different in Australia, that it's never going to succeed. And I got in the car and I was driving back to the office and I thought, that's it, I'm done. This is too hard, can't do it. I can't get beaten up anymore. We're running out of money. And I rang a good friend of mine in the business in New Zealand and I said, that's it, I'm done. This is too hard. I've had enough. He said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I've just been told I'm never going to succeed again. And, we're still losing money, blah, 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 and had a big vent. And he said, oh, okay. He said, so when did you decide you wanted to be a loser? And I said, no, don't start that. I don't need a pep talk. Like, don't give me that crap. And he said, no. He said, it's a serious question. Because he said, successful people, they hit a wall and they just push harder and they keep going. Unsuccessful people hit a wall and they turn around and walk away. So when did you decide you wanted to be a loser? And I thought, so I called him all sorts of names, as you can imagine. I hung up and drove back to the office and got back on the phones and started cold calling again. And it was a pivotal moment because, when I look back now, if I'd given that up at that point, because Ira and I talked about it, and I said, why don't we just go and open a real estate office up in Noosa, which is 2 hours north of Brisbane. It's beautiful. It's like going to Miami. Go out and we'll open one in Noosa and we'll just sell real estate and we'll have a quiet life and we'll live happily ever after. And we talked about that. And so that's what I thought. But if I'd done that, that my whole future would have been different. And just going back onto the phones, pushing harder, 15 years later, here we are. So.
Wow. Boy, I hope everybody that really sunk into your heart what you just heard. How many times have any of the people listening thought about, quitting and being a loser, as he said? Now, I have to ask this: in that 2 years, how many franchise did you sell?
We had 23 offices at the end of the second year. Total.
Okay.
In Australia, we had 80 odd in New Zealand. So we, across the 2 countries, we got up over 100, but 23, I think at the end of the second year, and we got 428 now. So, it's grown really well, but man, that first 2 years, but that's, you see that in real estate in sales, unless you happen to stumble into a great market, it takes 6 months, 12 months, sometimes longer for it to click. And I've always, as a leader, I've watched people And it's really hard to know who's going to succeed and who's not in real estate. I've seen some of the most likely people fail. I've seen some of the most unlikely people succeed. But what I've never seen is someone do the work, not succeed. And you just don't know how long it's going to take, and you see it just the light comes on. 6 months in, I've had limited listings, and all of a sudden everything starts clicking. But the key is always that consistent work. I've never seen someone do the work and not succeed. You will succeed if you hang in there and do the work. And that's a deep-seated belief. It's, like talking earlier about consistent persistence. It's that belief that if I keep doing what I know is right, I will succeed. Might take longer than I want, might get harder than I want, but I will succeed.
Now, I'm assuming that when you decided to branch out into the U.S., that the same kind of moments might have happened where people are saying, you guys are from Australia, New Zealand, that's not going to apply here in the States, especially the States, we think we're the best. So how did you overcome that?
Well, to be fair, Darryl, we haven't entirely. I mean, we've got a business, but it's not as big as we would have liked.
Okay.
We've launched auction, and we're working hard at that. Auction's not something that you guys do to the degree we do. We, in some parts of our world down here, we're 50% of our listings are auction properties. We auction them. But we're growing a really strong auction business now across the States, which is starting to get some traction. So yeah, it was the same dynamic. I mean, really, really tough. One of the things I learned when I moved to Australia, I thought New Zealanders and Australians were pretty much the same. The Aussies had a slightly different accent, but we're pretty much the same. And then you come and live here and you realize, like, it's different planets. It's just culture is so different. And then in Australia, and it's like the US, the 7 states all have a very different personality. You go to Sydney and New South Wales, and it is very different to Brisbane. They're just culturally very different. And so going to the US, same thing. We knew it was going to be really different, but probably underestimated just how different. The business and people's, in the US, there's a lot of people. Well, brokers. Some of the lessons that I learned, people talk about, they're called brokers because most are going broke. You need
That's my
sort of
joke. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
need
because you call
200
them
agents.
principal. You call them principals in your side of the world, right? So here we're
Yeah,
brokers. Yes. Go ahead.
yeah, exactly. And there's some dynamics. The commission is so much higher that you can go into real estate, make a couple of sales in some markets, and have a reasonable year. The performance per head. Our guys need to sell 2.5, 3 a month to actually, because our commission rates are 1.5, 2%. So they're quite different. So there's differences like that. So a lot of what we do is focus on how do you grow a team, how do you run a team, how do you do culture within an office, how do you do all of that sort of stuff. But it's not as big a thing in the US because you've got offices with 200 people in them, and half the agents haven't been into the office and don't come into the office. We train our principals on how to run great sales meetings. A lot of the principals in the US talk to them about that. Well, we don't do sales meetings. Like I don't see most. I've got agents working for me I've never met. And you think, how does that? So it's not right or wrong. It's just different. So the cultural differences, the business practice differences. So going to the US, yeah, it was massively different.
Well, I would say, just for the leaders that are watching us, I think that's very short-sighted for us in the U.S. To not have meetings, because I believe part of being a leader is having a vision and creating a company culture. And those meetings is one of the tools that you use to keep the culture alive, to embed it into people. And so that's I'm pro meetings in person. So now it seemed as when you said that about the U.S., it seemed like there was a bit of an unsatisfied feeling that you have about where you are compared to where you want to be. Did I pick up on that correctly?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a different different beast, and we haven't grown as fast. I mean, we've grown and we've got some wonderful businesses and people doing some great stuff, and the auction business is growing really strongly. So, I mean, there's good growth going on, Darryl, but it's just hard. And the market, COVID and the market that we've seen in the last few
Oh
years
yeah.
has
Yeah.
made it really hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, just all the dynamics that I'm sure everyone is facing. But one of the things that I do know is that in every market, people will have great years. And in the same market, I might have a record year. So how does that happen? It happens because I work harder, or I'm more focused on the basics, or I bring more energy, or I just double down and I make twice as many calls as I was. So the market, while it clearly plays a part in how you succeed, the market doesn't determine your success. The market is just a factor. The only thing that determines where I'm going to be in a year's time is what I do. It's entirely in my hands, and I can choose to work harder and to be positive and to bring energy and do the basics, or I can choose not to, and that's up to me. It's not up to my leader. It's not up to the market. It's not up to the government. It's not up to the banks. It's not up to any of that. It's obviously harder to be successful in a harder market. I've just got to work harder.
Absolutely. Awesome stuff. What I want to do, everybody that's on the call right now, is there's a chat or question and answer tab. I want to turn this over to you all to give you a chance to ask Mike any question that you want to ask. Now, whether you're an agent, whether you're a leader, broker, there's no right or wrong and questions, because as you can tell, Mike is just brilliant and he's been in this business so long. It's going to help everybody. So don't be shy. I want you to start to think about what you want to ask Mike and put it in the questions. While we're waiting for people to think through what they want to ask you, Mike, I got some one-off quick things I want to ask you, rapid fire stuff. Okay.
Sure.
One early habit that made the biggest difference in your career.
Business planning. Actually writing it down, putting a plan together. Yeah.
Awesome. Very good. One leadership belief you had to unlearn.
I believed going into leadership that I had to have all the answers. That if an agent came to me and said, "Oh, what about this or what about that?" I had to be able to say, "Oh, you do this or you do that," and I had to unlearn that, because you don't have to have all the answers. You got to find them and you got to support the agent or do whatever. But it's dangerous to think you have to have all the answers, because you give bad advice. So I had to unlearn that.
Very good. And by the way, that's true for some agents too. Some agents, they're afraid of a homeowner asks them a question or something. They've got to know the answer to everything, and sometimes they'll make stuff up, and that's not good either. Okay. One value you hope Harcourts will still have and be known for 50 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. I've read that. There's so many. I think at the end of the day, it's about people. Our business, real estate, is a people business, and there's always distractions. The internet was going to change it. AI is we're all going to lose our jobs. There's always this stuff going on, and too often it becomes about return on investment and share value. Real estate's about people at its core. So for me, the most important thing with Harcourts is that we're a people business, that our culture is the underlying thing that gives us who we are and the success we enjoy, because we focus on our people first.
Love it. Love it. Favorite book or books?
Oh, favorite books. I tend to read for so my favorite book is Lee Child's. No, sorry,
Darryl. Little product placement there. I had to do it there, Mike.
No, I read the Jack Reacher stuff, Lee Child. So I read for escapists.
Okay.
I like to read a book, kill them, shoot them up type.
Okay. Well, then I think I'm going to know what the answer might be for your favorite movie. What's your favorite movie?
Yeah.
All right. What's your favorite expression? That's not on the list of questions. I got one more for you. Too.
If it's to be, it's up to me. Probably favorite one. It's the people that count. Those are two that I've used for years and years.
Great. And your favorite real estate coach?
Oh, without a doubt, Bob Wolf. No, Darryl Davis. It's got to be Darryl Davis. It's Darryl Davis.
Oh, geez, the delivery was just brilliant. The way you set it up, I'm like, boy, he's really talking me up right now. You took me for a surprise. That was great. Okay. So let's go to a question. We only got one question with you shy people. Come on, what's going on?
Unusual thing for this crowd.
It's unusual for our crowd. We're probably missing some because of the time. But all right, Julie, why don't you ask the first and only question that we
I'm
got?
pulling some out of the chat, but I can't add them to the Q&A. So Sherry said, what do you do to recharge if you find yourself feeling burnt out? I think there's a lot of that right now, right?
Mm.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it's different for everyone. I find personally taking a break, like taking 2 or 3 days, is a really good thing to do. I'll jump in the car and we'll go to Noosa for a couple of nights and just relax and unwind. I think having regular time out is really important. Real estate is all consuming. I mean, I don't, I dream about it. So I don't think you ever turn off. But I think sometimes you just got to turn off or try to turn off and take some time. So I do that. Goal setting, Aaron and I do our goals every year and we sit down and really interesting. I remember I learned some lessons about that. I used to listen to people like you, Darryl, and different people say, oh, you got to have goals. You got to write them down. You got to put them in the shower, read them every day, And I used to think, oh, if I ever start doing that, kill me, like that's just terrible. And then I did one year, I listened to probably you and I wrote a few down and didn't read them, but at the end of the year, I looked at them and said, gee, I did most of those. And so anyway, I got on the wagon and started doing the goals. And I remember sitting there one January and I was writing some goals out and Orion said, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm writing my goals. And she said, oh, can I have a look at those goals? And I said, yeah, sure. And I gave them to her and that was how the fight began because she looked at the goals and said, it's all about you and your business. There's none about me. There's none about the family, about, and I thought, So it was a really good lesson. So now every year, Ari and I sit down and we write our goals out together and we have family goals. And so being really clear on those goals, because it's not about the money. The money simply funds the life, but the life is what you're after. So, what makes me do the hard stuff is knowing that there's a set of goals that I want to achieve this year, whether it be family goals or relationship goals or investment goals or, learn to dance or whatever it might be. And if I do the work, I'll achieve the goals. I'll achieve the money that allows me to achieve the goals. So having really clear goals is probably one of the most important things that gets me through the tough stuff.
That's so brilliant.
That
is so brilliant because what you just said in there was that, or at least what I heard, is it's not goals to get something that you think you should get. It's goals that give you the passion to push past the I don't want to, I don't feel like it. When you hit that wall, when you have something that you're excited about that speaks to your heart, that's where the energy comes from, because what's connected to the energy is passion for the life that you're creating for yourself. That was so brilliant, Mike.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I learned early on, I had one of my agents, his goal, he had one goal. And his goal was to be number one in the country for the industry. That was his goal. And some people say, well, that's a pretty shallow goal or not terribly meaningful. But for him, it was everything. That was all he was interested in. He just said to me, Mike, you just tell me, what have I got to do? How many houses have I got to sell or money have I got to earn to be number one for the country, for the industry? And so, we did the work and we found out what it would need to be, and then we added a bit, and that's what drove him. And that the power of that goal, and it wasn't the money, it was the goal of being number one. And he became number one in New Zealand for the industry, had his own TV show, became huge, high-profile agent, and that was his goal. And it taught me early on, it taught me just how important having that passion is and
yes.
How the goal drives, because it's the goal that drives. It's not the outcome. It's what it is that you want. And like you say, Darryl, it's having that passion inside, that purpose, that thing that gets you, what's going to make me go left and door knock as opposed to go right and play golf. And it's always the goal.
We have a Mike. We have a power agent who just posted on our Facebook closed group for our members. She said she's older in her years, and her commitment, her goal is to do 7 transactions, which may not sound a lot for some people, but for her, that would be a breakthrough. And she said, I have to do this because before I leave this earth, is what she said, I want to know that I'm able to do this. So for her, it's not about the 7 transactions. It's about knowing that she can do 7 transactions. And there's that passion again. So yeah, very good. All right, Julie.
You know, I learned,
ahead.
Darryl, just managing agents around the goal setting. All the goals were different. You know, I had one of my agents. Her goal was just to put her 2 children through private school. That was her goal. So that was all she focused on. How many houses do I have to list? How many calls do I have to make? How many sales do I have to make to achieve that? And so we went and got all the brochures for the school and understood what it looked like, and that was what drove her. You know, Michael, that I was just sharing with you, wanted to be number 1. Everyone had different goals, but the key was that they had the goals, that they knew what it was that they wanted. Because once you know what it is that you want, then it becomes hard to stop you going in that direction.
Yeah, very awesome. Very awesome. You know, and just for the leaders, and then we'll go to the next question, Julie. You know, what would as a leader watching this, what would your day-to-day business look like, your activities, if one of your goals was that every single agent under your leadership does blank? Like that you're passionate about serving your team and the other agents and watching them grow and hitting a number. I mean, how friggin' awesome would that be that you wake up as a leader committed to serving and helping your team get what they need to have a life worth smiling about, right? How rewarding would that be?
That's so true. That is so true.
Okay.
Well, and I have to just to tap back into that too, Mike, is what you said is so valuable, because a lot of leadership, unfortunately, they tell people what their goals should be. Your goal should be this, your goal should be that. And that's never going to tap into somebody's passion. So I love what you've just displayed there. And something different turns everybody on, right? So that's so powerful. And
That's
bringing
exactly
the
right.
family into it. I love that too, because that's so important. I love that. And that's
Yeah.
where the fight began. That was hysterical. Um,
When I was coaching my agents, I couldn't teach many of them much about real estate. You know, like most of them knew how to list a house. I mean, we did the basics and made sure that they did, but you know, the superstars, the top agents that I worked with, you know, they would sell around rings around me. They would do much better than I could ever do. But what I could do was challenge them, and what I could do was help them get clarity, and making sure that they were really clear on their goals was probably the most important thing that I could do with my agents. And so I'd spend a day or even 2 days with an agent working with them to understand what is it that you really want. And for a lot of our agents, they haven't really thought about it that way, or they maybe they haven't goal set with real meaning. They've, you know, written some goals down. I want to sell, you know, so many houses. I want to do this or that. But getting that real clarity, it just powers up your purpose. And so for me as a leader, if I could make sure the basics are in place and we had a good environment, we had all the things that you would expect, but if I could help you be really clear on what your why was and what your goals were, that was the best thing I could do for you.
Go ahead. Well, Jules, one
So
thing.
we did have a question earlier in the chat that talked about what would be your best advice for a brand new agent, and maybe that's part of it, right? Is just that get really clear on your why.
Yeah.
On your
Yeah,
goal.
and get a coach, get a mentor, you know, whether it's your partner or someone in the office or Darryl, but get someone that helps you get that clarity, because that unlocks it all, and it's hard to do it yourself sometimes. So yeah, I think being really clear on why you're doing what you're doing, having a plan, having someone to hold you accountable, finding out what brings the energy for you, you know, like, and we're all different. For me, putting on a nice suit and helps me bring energy, listening to music. But for others, you know, it's meditation, it's exercise, it's reading, it's listening to webinars, whatever it is. But just know what it is and use it to tap into your power and energy.
Now, I want to highlight something that you said about something when you've coached some of your top agents, that they can run rings around you. And so for the leaders, I just want to highlight that for a second, that being a great leader, a requirement or a prerequisite is not being a great salesperson. You can be a great leader without even having sales experience if you know how to lead people. And the analogy that I've used, like one of my favorite growing up singers was Luciano Pavarotti. Now, if you asked me who his singing coach was, I couldn't tell you, but he had one. Or any of the great stars or great performers or sports people, they have coaches. You may not know their names, but you don't have to. So anyway, Julie, next question. You're muted.
I know, I was coming off mute. I love it. Well, you just said, Darryl, really highlighted, it's kind of like being a parent, right? Your goal as a parent is to make your children independent of you rather than dependent on you. So
Right.
kind of the same with your agents, right? We have very many agents asking, do you have offices in Florida? Are you in Orlando, Florida? Where in the States are you? So I think you're making some fans over here, Mike.
It sounds like it.
No,
So
we
wait-
don't have offices in Florida. Up the West Coast, and Carolinas, I think. No, just the West Coast, not Florida.
Okay. All right. There you go.
Darn it for us Floridians. Mike, how do you restart your business after being out of the business for a year?
Yeah, that's really, really good question. Because I think I've mentioned earlier, I decided that it was time for me to retire. I was late 50s. I've been in the chair 20 years. I didn't want to be that coach that stayed 1-2 season too long. I started looking at my phone and I'd see who it was ringing me, and I started thinking, oh no, I'm turning it down and not answering it. And I thought, nah, it's time. It's time for me to step back. And so I did. And I found, I think I alluded to it earlier, not getting up with purpose and passion was terrible. And within 2 or 3 months, I'd become quite morose. I wasn't getting out of bed till 10 or 11. I was watching silly videos on my phone, and starting to, when people talk about mental health, my attitude's always been, oh, just pull your socks up, give yourself an uppercut, like just have a strong word with yourself. But I was really surprised how fast I became quite maudlin about everything, and just not having that purpose. So I would never, ever underestimate mental health issues for anyone, because they're real, and it's hard. And so after about 3 months, I thought, no, I've got to change this. I can't do this. And we'd appointed someone to run the business, and I was supporting him. But, the worst thing is to have the old leader sitting in the corner throwing rocks. So I actually went to one of our officers, who was dear friends with Irene and I, and she had an office here in Brisbane, a Harcourts office. And I said, would you take me on as your sales manager? And I'll come and work for you. And I don't want to be paid. I just want to do this, and want to work with your team and coach agents. And that was how I got back, got my purpose and drive. And I worked for Jackie for a year. Did one-on-ones and did recruiting and ran sales meetings and just did all the stuff that I loved doing with agents. And that re-energized me and relit a spark, and then obviously stepped back into our business and have been full-time again since, and loving it. And probably interestingly enough, the second time round is probably better, because I'll probably have a bit more perspective. I don't get quite as stressed out as I was. I understand that there's a whole lot of other priorities in life, and I'm actually enjoying the role, having had that break. But it was getting back into the actual agency business, doing one-on-ones with agents and understanding, didn't matter how inspirational I was as a leader, I still couldn't get some of them to do what I wanted them to do or what I thought they should do, and just going back to those fundamental basics in real estate re-fired me, re-energized me. It was great.
And when was this, Mike?
This was 3 years ago.
Wow, I'm blown away by you sharing that. The fact that you did share that was very raw and honest, and geez, that I know that made a difference in a lot of people right now. So thank you for that very much. So, awesome. for any new agent getting back, in addition to what Mike just said, what I heard was that you've got to get back to why did you get into the business in the first place? What was that thing you were excited about when you first got licensed? What did you envision for yourself? What was your passion then? Why were you doing this? You know, he went back to the roots of being in the trenches with the people and the smell of the people and the being on the field. So what's yours? What's your initial commitment to the industry? Why you got into it, and tap into that. Julie, next question.
Sure. Clark says, as you adapt to the U.S. market, how has your company focus evolved here in the U.S.?
So I guess they're asking so when you coming into the U.S. market, what did you change maybe based on how you run things on the other side of the world?
Yeah, well, I think I sort of alluded to it. The business model in the US is very different. And so training leaders or training agents needs to adapt and change to suit the business, operations. I think one of the things we really focus on though is who we are at our core. It's, you know, we have a purpose as an organization. Helping others achieve success is our purpose. We have a vision, and we have 4 values that underpin our business, and those 3 pillars are what drives our culture. And as much as you can change the business practice, and there are certain things that we do in Australia that don't work in the US and what have you, you can't go away from your core, I believe. So our core is about our values and is about being a family-owned, integrity-based business. And there are times in the US, because of the size of the market, you know, and you see some of the players in the US that spend the money they do and lose the money that they do buying businesses. And you know, for me, and this will sound probably a little bit unique, a little bit naive, you know, real estate is about people, and it's about soul, and it's about integrity, and it's about passion and purpose and all the things we've talked about. And I think when you lose that, you lose the whole point of this business. And so we've adapted our systems, and we've adapted the technology and different things to fit with how the US operate. But one thing we will never adapt or change is who we are at our soul, because that's what drives success. And you know, we've grown hugely over the last 25 years, and people say, oh, you know, what's the secret sauce, or how have you done that? It must, you know, did you have investors, and all sorts of questions. But no, we've done it purely because we know, I think we know who we are, and we're very focused on the values and on the soul of who Harcourts are, and culture's everything. And I'll give away profit, I'll give away all sorts of things, but I won't give away culture, because that's, I think in real estate, that's what drives us. And I just don't subscribe to the, you know, the big numbers ones where it's just share price and you throw lots of money in, and you know, like that to me isn't what this is about. And you know, you asked, you mentioned earlier about legacy. I think as you get a bit older, you understand, you know, as a 30-year-old, I had to grow, and I was recruiting, and I just wanted to be number one. And, you know, my focus was pretty aggressive. As you get older, though, you understand there's more to it. Priorities change. It's more about the people you help. It's more about the people that come up to you at a function and say, you know what, Harcourts has changed my life. That's what you do it for. And it's a shame that it takes, you know, 30 or 40 years to understand that. If I could have understood that right at the outset, I probably could have done things faster. But you do change. And so legacy, I've never set out to have a legacy, or to you know, the legacy's not sort of been important in that sense. But I think there is a legacy when you know what's important in life, and what's really at the center of the business that you're growing, and ultimately that's at the center of who you are. So once you understand yourself, then other things change, I think. That got a bit deep, Darryl, all of a sudden.
No, that was, I was just going to say to Julie, it sounds like Mike is like, works in our, like you're right. Everything you said is how we think.
Well, and what a common denominator, right? So in doing these podcasts and talking to leaders and knowing our culture, it's so, you were so eloquent how you just put that, but wow, because in talking to, and I mean, we're talking to industry leaders, but these are people like you. Your family is involved in your business. Your focus is helping families and helping people and changing lives, and that really is a common denominator. And I mean, what a beautiful thing to do in life when you take some of the other stuff out of it, right? Because the world is full of a lot of noise right
Right.
now,
Yeah.
and that's just beautiful.
Well,
When
I will say, I think, Mike, the reason why we have these epiphanies, like what you just shared, is the exact same epiphany I've had recently. I think because we're on the back end of our life, we're realizing, hey, I ain't gonna be here forever. I can't take any of this with me. So what am I leaving behind? And so I think you start to think about what you leave behind as you're on the back end of your life. So
a
Well,
60 crowd is in the house.
but I think also it's just life experience, isn't it? I mean, when you're younger, you're in a hurry. You got to grow wealth, you got to grow family, whatever it is. But just life teaches you so much, and
yeah,
as you get older, if you listen and take the lessons on, then you learn. And you do learn that your kids do grow up really fast. And at the time, you think they're never going to grow up. It seems to be going on forever. And then once they've grown up and moved out and got their own kids, you think, geez, that was really fast. I should have maybe made more of an effort and put more time into them when they were younger. And then, as a grandparent, you get this wonderful opportunity to redo it and to undo the damage. And so now I spend a lot of time with grandkids, probably more so than I ever spent with my own kids, because it was a different time. And
Oh, we
the
didn't have
really
the time
sad
then.
thing, the grandkids just love it, and they bloom and blossom, and they love coming to grandma and granddad's because we just give them our time, and we sit and play Lego, and there's always treats, and we never say no, and you
yeah.
give your grandkids that much love, they love you back, and it's the most beautiful thing. But as a 30-year-old with two young boys, I was out 7 days a week. I was doing open homes, or I was doing recruiting calls. I was working, and so you do learn just through life and just
Yeah.
through time. You understand the experiences.
All
Daryl
right,
hasn't
listen.
joined that club yet, but I'm sure he will be
Yeah, I haven't joined that club
so
yet. I'm waiting for
so
my son
back.
to get married. All right, so we now got a couple of questions that came in, but we got to let Mike go. But real quick, let's just, Julie, I'm going to read these really quick. Rick Rodriguez, I love your take on the recent NAR lawsuit in the U.S. and how it may reshape the brokerage practices here. Are there comparable concerns in international markets, or do those markets approach compensation and representation differently?
Yeah, I think the answer is, I mean, we're very aware, and we've certainly taken a long look, but how we operate is quite different. So we don't have the same. I mean, we're not as litigious anyway. We don't have the representation type thing. Most of our listing agents sell the listing they have. We double in the vast majority, as you would call it. We have some buyers agents, but very small numbers. So most real estate agents list and sell their own property. And our beliefs, we work for the seller because they employ us, but we have a fiduciary duty to the buyer. And so our role is to negotiate that sale to get a great outcome for both. So we don't have, I know a stronger belief in the US is you need an advocate for the buyer and an advocate for the seller. We don't have that belief in our business. So it's quite different. So we don't have the same issues that you guys have had through the NAR lawsuits and what have you. It's really interesting watching Compass and this exclusive inventory, because that's what we do here, and we've always done it. And you'd know that, Darryl, from your
Yep.
visits.
Yep.
We list property exclusively, so either to auction or it's just exclusive with my office, and we'll conjunct. So if you've got a buyer and you ring me up and you're another company or even another office in our company, say, "Oh, Mike, I've got a buyer. Can I take them through your listing?" We don't have to conjunct, and in the first 2 or 3 weeks, we probably won't, but at some point we will. But we don't have multiple listings. We don't have multiple listing services. So watching what Compass are trying to do with exclusive inventory is quite interesting because that's what we've done here for 50 years. And we had MLS 50 years ago, we got rid of it. And we believe we can best serve a seller by listing their property exclusively, by being solely focused on them doing that work, not just listing it and throwing it into the MLS and hoping someone sells it. So it's quite, our business model is quite different. And so we don't have some of the concerns that you guys have had. And it's like I was saying earlier, because our business model here is quite different, then all of our systems, our training, our coaching, everything is built around it, which makes going into somewhere like the US, which is totally different, so much harder.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And just for a little cocktail conversation for everybody watching, the also in Australia, New Zealand, they the reason why their fees are so low is because the homeowner actually will cut a check to cover the marketing expenses, which we don't do here in the States. So the agent is the one fronting all the advertising and all that stuff, but you guys don't have that either to worry about that. So
no, that's right.
Which is a sweet deal, actually. So
and we get a third of the commission, though. Come on, man.
Yeah, but if you go, especially in New York, if you say to a New Yorker, "Hey, do me a favor, you got to cut me a check for $10,000 to advertise your house," they won't ask me to leave. They'll throw me out. All right. So, Justin, last one. Felix Lopez, is Justin Green one of your kids? There is a group called the Green Group at Harcourts Prime Properties, who is top selling team.
Yeah, no, he's not one of our kids. I know Justin really well. Him and Chad are the green team, and they do very, very well in around Laguna Niguel and Newport. But no, he's not one of our kids.
Okay. All right. So gang, we're going to have to come to a close on this because, Mike's got a real job to do today, and you're so generous.
Tomorrow there, right?
It's Saturday morning here. I'm going to go and do some work in the garage. I've got to get some rubbish out and put it out the front today. Then we've got our second eldest granddaughter's birthday party at 3:00. She's turned 6. And then we've got 2 of them staying tonight. So, yeah, I've got a busy day, man.
Oh, that sounds
got
awesome.
Grandchildren to take care of. We got to let him go.
What day is it there now?
Saturday.
It's Saturday. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's always crazy. It's like if you want to get back to the States on Saturday, you got to leave Sunday. It's very weird. All right, so last thing, Mike, is there any thing that we didn't cover that you'd like to drop for folks listening in?
Oh, hey, I don't think so, Darryl. I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think authentic is so important, especially in the times we live in. So I think being true to who you are, being open, being authentic is probably, and you could go on and on about social media and the changes that we've seen and all the issues that we're seeing around the world. But I think at your core, just being real, genuinely caring about the people around you, genuinely wanting to help, saying yes more. I think just being authentic is really important.
Do me a favor, Power Agents and guests, everybody on the call, in the chat, can you just acknowledge, Mike, was this valuable for you? How valuable? Because I didn't pay him to do this. So
what?
Oh, sorry, you didn't get that memo.
Love you two together. I'm just saying.
Right, I've got to go now, Darryl. I've had enough of this.
Well, all right. So the love is piling in right now, and people. One of the things I did see somebody wrote earlier was that this was one of the most authentic and real conversations I've listened to, and yeah, there it is right there. This came from Sarah too and a few others, but yeah, Mike, that's we haven't talked in a while, and this interview brought back what I love about you, and that's your authenticity, and you're just real. And so thank you for bringing you to this conversation and making a difference in people's lives, which I know you did. It means a lot to me and to them. So thank you. All right. I hope to see you soon. Okay. So when you're in this side of the world, please ring me. Maybe I'll fly and meet you or something. All right.
Yeah, it'd be great, mate. Thank you.
Mike, thank you very much, Mike. Stay safe. And everybody, thanks again for tuning in. And don't forget, everybody, to keep smiling. All right. Thanks again, Mike.
See you soon.